Is the Cricket Ovation 2 a good phone to buy in 2022? Well, in this video, we're going to find out. What's going on, guys? Kalipis Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the Cricket Ovation 2 and going over whether or not it's a good phone to buy in 2022. So let's get into it. Now, this phone has a 6.82-inch LCD display with a resolution of 720p, a PPI of 263, and an aspect ratio of 20.5:9. So we're getting a decently tall form factor here that's going to be good for all kinds of content consumption. So if you're streaming videos, it's most likely going to be in landscape mode, and it's going to give you a nicer, more cinematic appearance. And if you're scrolling through social media or reading something, you're not going to have to scroll as much because more stuff is going to show up on the actual display. So overall, while the display quality is pretty standard for an entry-level phone like this, the size and the form factor really make it stand out from a lot of others. Now, this phone has 32 gigabytes of internal storage with micro SD card expansion, which is really not very much. So I definitely recommend getting a micro SD card with this phone because even if you're a more average user, 32 gigabytes is definitely not very hard to fill up. And it's always good to have more storage for your photos and videos and stuff like that. So a micro SD card is really going to help out with that. Now, there's no wireless charging with this phone, which is not very surprising, but we do have a fingerprint scanner right here on the back. Unfortunately, no face unlock, but the fingerprint scanner is really nice to have. So let's go ahead and give it a try and see how well it works. There we go, one more time. And there we go. As you can see, real fast and responsive, no issues here. So taking a look at the rear camera setup here, we got a triple camera on the back with a 13 megapixel main camera, a 5 megapixel ultra wide camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. This photo here was taken by the main camera, and it's definitely not bad at all. While it's definitely not nearly the quality of some of the mid-level phones and higher end phones out there, it's still pretty acceptable. So if you want to take some photos for social media and stuff like that, while there are better options, it's still not going to be the worst. This was taken with portrait mode. Now, this is a little bit more impressive than the main camera in my opinion, because the background is really nicely blurred, even in this questionable lighting. And considering the fact that portrait mode was meant for people and not giant metal horses, I would say that it did pretty well on this phone. Now, this photo was taken with the ultra wide camera, and this photo is real nice looking. Even though it's a little bit dark, there's not really a whole lot of distortion compared to the main camera. So overall, are these photos really going to be very high end? No, not really. But at the same time, if you want to take photos that you're going to keep for social media and stuff like that, this phone is definitely going to be better than a lot of other entry-level phones out there. Internally, this phone is getting 3 gigabytes of RAM with the MediaTek Helio A22 processor. I ran a Geekbench 5 benchmark test on this phone, and it came back with a single core score of 149 and a multi-core score of 453. So this is really one drawback to this phone. Despite its nice design, good display, and decent features, the processor just really isn't very strong. So if you're expecting any high performance or even good performance for that matter, you might be a little disappointed here, because with this phone, it's really very much going to be meant for the basics, like sending text messages, making calls, maybe a little bit of web browsing and some light social media use, and then streaming videos. Other than that, it's really not going to be the best for a whole lot else. So if you're expecting to be on your phone a lot, you might want to consider a device with a faster processor. Now, for the battery, this phone has a 3900 milliamp hour battery that does not support fast charging. So while not being the worst out there, it's a pretty mediocre battery. It'll get you through the day as long as you're not using it super heavily, but it's not going to charge up very fast compared to some others that do support fast charging. And over time, as the battery starts degrading, you're probably going to see it wear out pretty quick with this phone compared to one that has, say, a 5000 milliamp hour battery. So if you're really going for battery life, if that's one of your main concerns, there are definitely much better options out there. But if you're not too concerned with battery life and you're fine with getting a new phone every so often, then it should still be fine. So now that we've gone over some of the specs, let's take a closer look at the phone itself. So on the left here, we got a slot for the SIM card and the micro SD card. On the bottom, we got a 3.5mm headphone jack, the microphone, a USB-C port, and the speaker. On the right hand side, we got the power key and the volume keys. On the top of the phone, there's a noise canceling microphone. On the back, we got our camera setup, our flash, the fingerprint scanner, and a Cricket logo right down here. Overall, the phone is made of a glossy material that doesn't look bad, but it doesn't look very premium, and it really picks up fingerprints. One thing I do like about this phone's design is that even though it has a really large display, it also has a nice slim design, so you don't really notice it. It doesn't feel uncomfortable when you're holding it or carrying it in your pocket. So that's a nice thing about this phone, because there are lots of others that have larger displays but might not necessarily be so comfortable to hold because they're a little bit bulky. But with this phone, it's really not. Now, the design itself does look pretty good. It has thin bezels despite the one at the bottom. I'm not a huge fan of the water drop notch. I wish they would transition to a hole punch instead. But overall, it's an entry-level phone, so I wasn't really expecting a whole lot anyway. The phone doesn't have a whole lot of weight to it, which could be good, I guess. The build of this phone doesn't really feel flimsy or cheap at all. It just feels like a pretty average entry-level phone without a whole lot going on. So in conclusion, is the Cricket Ovation 2 worth buying in 2022? Honestly, I would say yes for two reasons. First of all, it has a really large display, and for content consumption, like streaming videos and reading and that sort of thing, this is gonna give it a much better experience. And in addition to this, it has a slightly taller form factor than the average phone, so that's gonna help out a lot too. The other reason I would say this phone is worth buying in 2022 is the ultra-wide camera. Again, that's not really a huge thing, but I want to say the vast majority of entry-level phones like this don't have ultra-wide cameras. They either have a macro camera or nothing at all. And this phone has not only an ultra-wide camera, but also a depth sensor, so you can take some nice portrait photos. So overall, if you're looking for an entry-level phone and you're not going to be doing too much on it, but you're going to be streaming lots of videos and just generally consuming content, and you want to take the occasional nice photo here and there for social media or something like that, then the Cricket Ovation 2 is still going to provide a fair amount of value in 2022. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope you found this information useful as well. If you did, don't forget to leave a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. And as always, I will see you in the next video.